What is going on, y'all? Gamers Goon here today with Week 5 in college football preview predictions, all that goodness that we have coming up. There's a game starting on Thursday. We're not going to talk about Army Temple. Army's going to win. Army's going to win that. We have to, unfortunately, talk about Miami, Virginia Tech. It is a ranked Miami team, so we do have to mention them. Miami, coming to this game 7th, they are 20-point favorites against Virginia Tech, and I do think they will ultimately beat Virginia Tech, probably clearing that margin. So we are going to ride with Miami to clear the spread of 20 points. Rutgers versus Washington. Washington is actually the underdogs in this game, believe it or not. Rutgers coming in as 2.5-point favorites. Rutgers, the undefeated team when you come to this matchup. But if you look at Rutgers, man, I'm not too impressed. 3-point Virginia Tech victory. They played Akron. They played Howard. Washington, 3-1. They beat Weber State. They beat Eastern Michigan. They lost to Washington State. They beat Northwestern pretty badly. Rutgers, I get they're undefeated right now, but to me, they're kind of in that Northwestern territory. Granted, I haven't got to see Rutgers play this season, and I probably will get to see them play Friday because there shouldn't be anything going on at 7 p.m. on a Friday night. So I should be able to turn that game on and see what's happening over there. But I'm going to take Washington to win. I'm going to take Washington to win that one. Washington, 2.5 points for Rutgers. It means it's going to be a close game, but I'm going to ride with Washington to get the job done. Next, we got North Texas versus Tulsa. 6.5-point favorites are North Texas, the Mean Green. They beat Wyoming pretty bad. Tulsa had a close game last week against Louisiana Tech. As you guys know, I do keep up with North Texas. This is yet another North Texas game that I won't get to watch, and my eyes are like really watery today for some reason. I think it might be because of the sun. But North Texas versus Tulsa, another game I will not get to watch. Give me a second. I have like sleep in my eye, and they're really watery. There we go. Hopefully I got it. But North Texas, another game I won't be able to watch when it comes to them. As you all know, I keep up with North Texas, and I was going to watch them last week, but there's some good games going on when North Texas played. Unfortunately, North Texas, I got to go on ESPN Plus. It's not my main priority. I want to see the good games. North Texas, though, they do, or they at least should, clear the spread and beat Tulsa. They've looked pretty solid this year, going in 3-1 into this game against Tulsa. Illinois versus Penn State. Illinois versus Penn State should be an interesting one. 19 Illinois going up against 9 Penn State. Penn State is 19-point favorites. I think that is completely disrespectful. A top 25 team, a team that has proven the last few weeks that they can hang with the big dogs. Illinois beat Kansas. Now, I know Kansas hasn't looked good since then, but they beat Kansas. Kansas at one point was a top 25 team. Nebraska is or was a top 25 team, and a lot of people still think they could be a top 25 team even after that loss to Illinois. They are a solid team. They got a good quarterback there. Now, you look at Penn State. And they got a good team, obviously. But the one thing I'll say about Penn State is I don't necessarily see their offense beating us by 19 points. Can Penn State win this game? Absolutely. Can they win this game? Absolutely. But how do you win this game if you're Penn State? Because Illinois, in my opinion, could probably figure out a way to stop that run game. So the that's receiving, my bad. The 104 yards from Singleton and the 62 yards per game from Katron Allen, those might drop a good 20, 30 yards each, right? So who's going to have to beat us in this game? Drew Aller. What has Drew Aller shown in his college football career so far? He is not great when it comes to relying on him. He can do a good job of managing the game. He can do a good job of using his running backs and then timely throwing, right? But if you make this game a game where Drew Aller is the guy that has to beat you, how do you see Penn State winning this game by 19 points? If Drew Aller's the one forced to beat you, Illinois has a guy in the secondary who's one of the leaders in the country in takeaways in Xavier Scott. So when you think about it and when you look at it, that 19 points starts to become really questionable. I don't know how you got there. It's complete disrespect to Illinois. And the way Luke Altmaier's moving the ball right now, I have no clue how you can justify a 19-point spread. Last week, granted, it was a Friday night game and some weird stuff happened on Friday night, right, against Nebraska. They figured out a way to move the ball running it against Nebraska, who's pretty solid. Has a solid defense. Caden Fegan got going. Josh McCray broke out. Khalil Valentine in small spurts at every single game this season when they needed a runner to go in there and get more than just a 3 or 4 yard gain. He has been able to go get those chunk plays, them 7-8 yard rushes. Lowry, you get him in space, he can get yards. Those are just the running backs. Then you talk about the receivers. Pat Bryant has 6 touchdowns on the season. By the way, he's played 4 games. Zachary Franklin continues to make impressive catch after impressive catch every single week. Arkin got involved and looked good last week. Heck, we even got an offensive lineman in Brandon Henderson who can catch the ball. But this is a 19-point spread. That spread will not work. That 19 spread, they will not cover that spread. I would be shocked. It would take an uncharacteristic performance from us for them to cover that spread. I get it's away. Penn State, James Franklin, they're calling for a whiteout. They're calling for this to be one of those games where the Penn State fans, they come out and they bring their energy. They want the Penn State fans to come out and treat this like an Ohio State. They want them to come out and treat this like we are one of those elite teams, right? Because James Franklin knows that they're going to need it against Illinois. This isn't a 19-point spread game. It's not. And I don't know who's making the spread. I don't know who. The spread's ridiculous. Illinois will at least cover that 19 spread. Do they come out victors of this game? I'm going to say no, but once again, this is one of those games just like last week. I'm going to cautiously say no for Illinois, but this is a game that you can expect Illinois to hang into. I get it. Teams are going to look at us as the old Illinois, let's throw out a random year, 2015 Illinois, where we're not very good, right? They're going to be like, oh, well, these guys are just having a lucky run. Maybe. But we proved last week that we can play with everybody. We can play with anybody in the country. Now, the schedule gets tough. Do you expect Illinois to win all these games, right? They play Penn State. They play Michigan. They play Oregon. If you win one of those games, you're in for business. All you have to do is win one of those games, and all of a sudden Illinois becomes a big talking point. And Penn State, I think the recipe is there to beat Penn State, but I am going to go with Penn State to win, simply because they have the whiteout energy at home. 6:30 kickoff. Should be fun. We're going to have to wait all day for that one. That's not going to be fun because I also have to wait all day to watch my Oregon Ducks as well, who are 24.5 favorites against UCLA. I'm going to have to wait all day to see them. Now, UCLA last week lost by 17 to LSU, coming off of a brutal game against Indiana. And I think this is going to be very much the same as that Indiana game. Listen, Oregon are coming off a bye. They needed a week to get healthy. They needed to get Matthew Bedford healthy. They needed to get Jeffrey Bassa healthy. Now that they're healthy, Oregon, assuming they're healthy, Oregon should be the team that we expected them to be earlier in the season. You're undefeated. You're undefeated, so you have that going for you, but you still have the negative kind of connotations around you from the Idaho game, from the Boise State game. Oregon State did a lot for the Oregon fans, making it, this is the team. National media doesn't see it that way. They don't need to see it that way. You keep winning games, they're going to be forced to put you in the playoffs. It doesn't matter what Joe Schmo at ESPN thinks, right? UCLA, this is a game you're going to win big. I think this is going to be very similar to Oregon State. I see Oregon State as a better team than UCLA. So Oregon, UCLA, 24.5. Oregon clears it. Oregon clears it. This could be a game, once again, that we see Dante Moore go in there in the second half. This could be a game where we get to see maybe Jaden Lamar go in there in the second half. This could be a game where you get to see some of them freshmen come in and really make impacts there in the second half, because I don't see this UCLA team really hanging with us. Like I said, you got to get guys healthy. This might be a game even if you are maybe about 85-90% there on getting Bedford and Bassa healthy. This might be a game you still even limit snap counts for Bassa, and you might not even have to play Bedford. I mean, the offensive line looked decent against Oregon State. It looked a lot better than the first 2 weeks, and I think they'll be fine. But 24.5. I think Oregon clears that. I could see Oregon winning this game like 49-14 or something like that. So we're going to ride with Oregon. Michigan versus Minnesota. Not necessarily. I think this is like the big noon game, by the way. I don't get it. Michigan still working in their quarterback decision. They coming off a win against USC late. I think they hit a field goal to win that game. Undefeated, though. Well, actually, they are defeated. 2-2 Golden Gophers. They lost to Iowa and North Carolina. I guess they're not undefeated. But Michigan, they're going to win that game. Michigan's going to win that game. 9-point favorites. Michigan probably clears it, let's be honest. Nebraska's 10-point favorites against Purdue. Nebraska is coming off revenge week. They're going to want a big time victory to kind of just reintegrate themselves into the top 25. So Nebraska's going to win that one pretty easily. Buffalo versus UConn's 5.5-point favorites, which means we got to talk about it because it's within a touchdown. UConn beat FAU last week, and I think that I've been saying that Florida Atlantic team's not very good. Buffalo, they beat Northern Illinois. Good win there for Buffalo. But you look at these two teams that are kind of just in the middle of the pack. UConn's the favorites. I'm riding with Buffalo. They're just coming off the top 25 win, so we're going to ride with Buffalo. We don't have to talk about Boston College, Western Kentucky. It's not within a touchdown. That's perfect. Maryland, Indiana. Maryland versus Indiana. I'm excited for this one. Indiana, Maryland. Maryland coming off a big win against Villanova, but it's Villanova. They lost to Michigan State. Obviously, Maryland did earlier this season. Indiana still hasn't really played anybody. The best team they played is UCLA, who we don't think is that good. So this could be a little bit of a telling sign here. Can Indiana beat Maryland? Maryland, not necessarily the best team in the Big Ten, but they're one of those middle to lower tier, like around the 8-9 spot in if you were to rank Big Ten teams. They're a middling Big Ten team. Indiana, can they get the job done? We'll see. They're 7-point favorites. I'm going to ride with Indiana until they prove it otherwise. But Indiana, they could be going 5-0 to start the season, and that'd be huge for Indiana. That puts them one win away from being in a bowl game, and they have Northwestern coming up. You'd think that's a winnable game. Nebraska, Washington might be tough. Michigan State could be a winnable game for them. Michigan, Ohio State, and then maybe Purdue's a winnable game. So they have a few winnable games coming up, but if you're Indiana, you want this Maryland game real badly, because that means you only got to get one of Northwestern, Michigan State, or Purdue. Because you probably don't beat Nebraska. You probably don't beat Washington. You probably don't beat Michigan, and you probably don't beat Ohio State. Now, if you do, you make it to even a better bowl game, but you put yourself in a really good spot. You have a lot of games left to get one win to be a bowl team. Indiana, not necessarily a must-win game, but a game you think would be taken with much importance if you are Indiana. So I do have Indiana winning the game. I don't know if they'll clear that 7-point spread, though. BYU versus Baylor. BYU with the shockers of last week, man. Wow. I did not expect what we saw at BYU last week. Kansas State. Kansas State's a team. Now, their quarterback at Kansas State has been pretty solid the last few weeks. He's gotten the job done against Tulane. He's gotten the job done against Arizona. He runs into BYU, and it is a completely different story. Now, BYU, 38-9. BYU, you look at them. I don't really know how you do it. Their offense wasn't great, but they won with 38-9. BYU versus Baylor. Baylor coming off a close game, overtime loss to Colorado. We know Baylor can hang with some of those not top tier, but some of those offenses that are. I mean, Colorado's a respectable offense, right? We know that they can hang with some of those guys. BYU coming off a big win, ranked 22 now. Baylor's actually the favorites by 3 to beat BYU. I'm gonna ride BYU though. BYU, keep it rolling. I'm going to ride with BYU to win that game. Oklahoma State versus Kansas State. Now, Kansas State is 4.5-point favorites as the 23 seed, and Oklahoma State is the 20th team in the country. Both teams are 3-1. Oklahoma State now. This is being played at Oklahoma State. I don't know. I don't know how this is considered a victory for. I don't know why they would think that this is going to be a victory for Kansas State. Kansas State had a rough time with BYU. I think you're going to have a rough time with Oklahoma State. I have Oklahoma State winning. 4.5 for Oklahoma State or for Kansas State. I don't see it. Kentucky, Ole Miss. Ole Miss is 17.5-point favorites. Ole Miss has looked really solid this season so far. They haven't played a close game all season. They haven't, and this is probably going to be one of those games that it's a team that can stick around. It's Kentucky. They just hung with Georgia about 2 weeks ago, right? Kentucky's a team that will stick around. 17.5, probably not the line, but Ole Miss will win. Tulane, South Florida. Tulane, a team that has been sticking with some of these good teams, right? They stuck with Kansas State. They stuck with Oklahoma. Struggled a little bit against Louisiana, though. And this kind of has a recipe for that. South Florida, they came in and they did not do anything against Miami. We thought maybe they could hang around with Miami. No. Tulane wins this game, though. Tulane should win the game pretty easily, in my opinion. Navy versus UAB. I believe that is Alabama Birmingham, I believe. It is. It doesn't tell me. Good. But Navy 3-0. UAB 1-2. UAB, the underdogs by 4 points. I'm going to go with Navy to win the game. Northern Illinois versus NC State. A little bit of an interesting one. 5.5-point favorites are Northern Illinois. NC State coming off of a bad loss to Clemson. Northern Illinois coming off of a bad loss to Buffalo. Both teams need a bounce-back game. North Carolina State on paper is the better team. 5.5 favorites. I'll take it. North Carolina State wins the game. Not that we're going to talk about the JMU game because they're playing Ball State. They're going to win. But JMU last week, man, they showed up. They showed up and beat UNC. Big time win there for JMU. James Madison. Louisiana versus Wake Forest. Another decent little game going on. 1-2 Wake Forest, who have some losses to Virginia and Ole Miss. Not the most telling of losses. Louisiana, on the other hand, a loss to Tulane. Once again, not the most telling of losses. Decent little teams. Does that tell us too much going into this game? I don't know. Wake Forest, 3-point favorites. Wake Forest probably takes it. A&M versus Arkansas, 3.5-point favorites is A&M. Arkansas 3-1 so far. They beat Auburn last week, but they lost to Oklahoma State a couple weeks ago. A&M, obviously, we know how they started off the season, losing to Notre Dame. The Notre Dame team that we're a little bit questioning now. Bowling Green, once again, hung with A&M. Bowling Green starting to hang with some of those big schools. Beat Florida pretty badly, A&M did. A&M wins this game, probably. They probably win this game. I'm going to have them clear the spread of 3.5. USC versus Wisconsin. USC is 15.5-point favorites against Wisconsin. That seems about right. Wisconsin, not the greatest of teams. Alabama beat them pretty badly. Not very many impressive wins. USC coming off a big week. USC wins it. They probably clear that 15.5-point spread. TCU versus Kansas, another little interesting game. Kansas really starting to reel. A bad stretch of games. Lost Illinois by a touchdown. Lost UNLV by a field goal. Lost West Virginia by a touchdown. 3 plays in those 3 games, a play in each of those games could have flipped the script, and they could be 4-0. TCU 2-2. Bad loss to SMU. A 1 point. I believe they allowed a comeback for UCF to win that game. They do have a win over Stanford, a little bit of a respectable win. Kansas, though, they need to bounce back. 1.5 favorites. Kansas, you need to show up this week. Jaden Daniels, I think it's time for him to have a big week. Hasn't had the most successful of seasons just yet. I think it's time for him. Or Jalen Daniels, my bad. I think it's time for him to show up. Kansas wins that game. Western Michigan versus Marshall. Marshall, 3.5-point favorites. Marshall actually did a good job in the first half, sticking with Ohio State. There was 1 point Marshall, I believe, had the lead, and I was like, oh wow, what is happening right now? They scored the first touchdown of that game. They took a good chunk of time off the clock too, so good for them. Western Michigan, they're 1-2. They're 1-2. There's not much to write home with. They couldn't score on Ohio State. Marshall seems to have a little bit of a strategy, and they know how to get some points on the board. Seems like they're coached up pretty well. I'm going to ride with Marshall to clear that 3.5. Georgia State versus Georgia Southern. Battle of the state, or the Georgia schools. Georgia State coming off a Vandy win, and Georgia Southern coming off of an Ole Miss loss. Georgia State wins this game, though. 3.5-point line. Georgia State takes it. Central Michigan versus San Diego State. Central Michigan coming off of a win against Ball State. California beat San Diego State last time out. I'm probably riding with Central Michigan. Do I ride with the 3 points? Yeah, we'll ride with it. We're going to go with Central Michigan to win that game. Liberty versus App State. Liberty is going to win this game. They're going to win this game. I don't know what else to tell you. Liberty undefeated so far. App State, last game, man. Ooh. So, obviously, the Clemson game. You're like, oh, well, it's Clemson. You bounce back against Eastern Carolina. But then 48-14 against South Alabama? South Alabama, a 2-2 team? Yeah, App State, Liberty's losing. Or Liberty's winning. 3-point favorites. It's going to be more than that. It's going to be a 10, 14-point game. Liberty wins. Fresno State versus UNLV. UNLV, you start respecting UNLV. Their last time out, they beat Kansas. Fresno State, 3-1. They just beat New Mexico last week. I'm riding with UNLV. I think they're a little bit of a dark horse. They're 1-point underdogs. They win this game at home. Give me UNLV. Louisville versus Notre Dame, one of the big games of the week, just like that Illinois game earlier. 6.5-point favorites is Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame, I'm let's be honest. Notre Dame, they came in week 1. Texas A&M impressed everybody. Northern Illinois, they disappointed everybody. And then they were on a revenge tour and beat the crap out of Purdue. They handled their business with Miami, Ohio. Louisville, I don't think you want to run into Notre Dame. Notre Dame wins this game. I know that you're the higher seed or the higher rank, but 6.5 favorites. Notre Dame comes in and wins this game by 10 or 14 points. Colorado versus UCF. UCF is 15-point favorites. 15-point favorites. They beat TCU. They beat Sam Houston. They beat New Hampshire. 15-point favorites against Colorado. I usually don't talk about the games that aren't within a touchdown, but 15-point favorites against Colorado? Why? Colorado's going to win this game. Colorado's going to win this game. Why is UCF 15-point favorites? Colorado wins that game pretty easily, in my opinion. I don't see it. I don't see why they would ever have 15-point favorite UCFs. I don't understand that. Oklahoma versus Auburn. I think that's next up. Yep, Oklahoma versus Auburn. Oklahoma versus Auburn. 2.5-point favorites, Oklahoma. That's a great line for Oklahoma because I think they blow it out. I don't like this Auburn team. Oklahoma, on the other hand, obviously coming off a bad week, but I think this is one of those games where you're like, you know what? Sure, we lost to Tennessee, but it's Tennessee, man. We lost by 10 to Tennessee. We didn't lose by 60 to Tennessee. We lost by 10 to Tennessee. We didn't lose to Northern Illinois. No, we lost to Tennessee. We lost to a top 10 team in the country. Put some respect on our names. Auburn, they're going to handle their business against Auburn. 2.5-point favorites. I think Oklahoma clears it. I think Oklahoma will clear that. UTSA versus East Carolina is a 4-point favorites towards East Carolina. I tend to agree with that. East Carolina, kind of a middling team, but they always seem to be in some decent little games. UTSA, same thing there. I'm just giving the edge to the home team, East Carolina. North Carolina versus Duke. North Carolina, I don't want to even talk about you. Last week, North Carolina absolutely made me so disappointed. Duke, we're gonna take Duke. I don't even care if I'm wrong. 2.5-point favorites, Duke. I have them clearing that spread. You made me mad, North Carolina. How do you lose to JMU as badly as what? 70 to 50? How do you give up 70 points? How do you even give up 70 points? That's terrible. That is absolutely terrible. Texas versus Mississippi State. 39.5-point favorites against Mississippi State. Mississippi State lost by 17 last week to Florida. Mississippi State hasn't looked great. I think that's like a 24-point loss to Toledo, a 7-point loss to Arizona State. Texas, 39.5 is such a big margin, though. I don't have them clearing it, but I have Texas winning it. I'll say they win by like 34 points. So let's go with that. Let's go with that. Louisiana Tech versus FIU. Florida International. With a generational loss to Monmouth. I believe they were up at this game. Yeah, they were up at one point in this game. I believe. Yeah, I think they were up like 21-7 at one point, and then they just collapsed. I don't even know. I don't even know what Monmouth is, and they lost to them. Where even is Monmouth? Does it say? New Jersey. It's in West Long Branch, New Jersey. Kessler Stadium. Yeah, I don't even know what Monmouth is, and they lost to them. Louisiana Tech, though, coming off of actually a close loss against Tulsa. We're going to ride with Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech going to get the job done. 2.5-point favorites. I tend to love that line. Give me Louisiana Tech to win. Iowa State, they're ranked going up against Houston. 13-point favorites. Iowa State undefeated so far on the season. Houston, bad game last week against Cincinnati. I am going to ride with Iowa State to win that game. They probably clear that 13-point spread. If you can't handle business with Cincinnati, what makes you think you're going to handle business with and top 20 team in Iowa State. Charlotte versus Rice. Rice is 7-point favorites. I'll just ride with Rice. Why not? Rice 1-3, Charlotte 1-3. Not too much stake on that game. Clemson versus Stanford. Clemson is 21.5 favorites. Stanford is a 2-1 team though, beating a Syracuse team that was ranked. They beat Cal Poly. They obviously didn't beat TCU week 1. Clemson, not the greatest of teams this season. 21.5 seems like a big line. I'm going to keep Stanford in. I'm going to have Stanford hold them under that. I don't think Clemson's going to clear that 21.5, but I do think Clemson will win. Ohio State, Michigan State, 24-point favorites is Ohio State against Michigan State. I think it's going to be more than that. Not too much to say about that game. Ohio State wins. They win big. I don't even think that 24 is enough. They're probably going to win that game, probably like 42-7 or something. Georgia, Alabama. Georgia is 2-point favorites against Alabama. Now, this is where I'm going to shock you all. This game is being played at Alabama. It is being played at Alabama. And Alabama, obviously, this season, still undefeated, but they don't seem to be getting much love from the national media. I mean, they're 4th in the country, sure, but Georgia, they don't look good against Kentucky. They're going to want to prove it type of game, but ultimately, I think Alabama's going to win this game. Now, don't get mad at me. But I'm riding with Alabama to win this game. Milrow's got Carson Beck's number. Milrow, in my opinion, is going to be the best player on the field come Saturday. I'm going with Alabama to win the game. 2-point favorites, Georgia. Forget your 2 points. Alabama's winning that game. Fortunately, we got to talk about it. LSU versus South Alabama. 22-point favorites is LSU. I do not think they will clear the 22, but I do think they beat South Alabama. Texas Tech versus Cincinnati. Now, that's just a game I don't really want to talk about, but it's a 3-point game. Texas Tech, the favorites against Cincinnati. I'm going to ride with Cincinnati, though. Why not? They're coming off a good week. Air Force versus Wyoming. Wyoming did not look good last week. Air Force, on the other hand, I'm not sure what they even did last week. What did they do last week? The last time out they lost by 28 to Baylor. You know what? We'll give Air Force the win. Keep that that no-win season going for Wyoming. SMU, the favorites against Florida State. Florida State finally picked up their first victory. Shout out to Florida State. They finally did what everybody else did like multiple weeks ago. They got their first victory. SMU played close with that BYU team. They've been pretty impressive throughout their non-con. Beat TCU pretty big. They probably beat Florida State here. I'm going to ride with SMU to get the job done. 5.5, probably not the line. Probably a 24-21 type of game. Give me SMU, though. Boise State finally ranked. Ashton Genty and company got their team ranked going against Washington State. Boise State obviously hung with Oregon. Washington State, though, is the undefeated team in this game. But I'm going to still ride with Boise State. Give me them. 7.5-point favorites. Boise State wins that game. I don't know if they'll clear that 7.5, though. Arizona versus Utah. Arizona, obviously, they collapsed when we all thought, you know what, this is the time to shine. You got a big game against Kansas State. They collapsed. Now they get a chance at Utah. Utah, another team, beat Oklahoma State. They beat Utah State. They beat Baylor. They've beat Southern Utah. Outside of Southern Utah, they've played pretty good competition. So you'd like to take Utah here, and 11 points seems reasonable. Arizona proved that they can't really hang with some of those mainstays in the top 25. So I'm going to ride with Utah. Why not? I don't even think Cam Rising played last game. I don't even think he played last game, did he? Yeah, it was Wilson. It was Isaac Wilson started last game. But I tend to think Utah will win regardless of the QB. So that's what we have going into this week. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time. If you haven't already, make sure you tune in tomorrow for my NFL preview and prediction video. Thank you.